Well, good for the soul. I just had an amazing conversation with Derek Turner. I think we talked for an hour and a half, push stop, and then talked for another hour. And it was still the goodness of God and what's going on in his life and my life. We hadn't caught up in a while. Anyway, brief introduction, because Derek and I just basically hit record the moment he got on, and eventually ended up deep in what faith is to us, how faith is a response or a fruit or the evidence. But we go pretty deep into that subject. We talked about a lot of other stuff too. And near the end of this conversation, Derek shares about what's been going on in his life, and really just a sweet conversation. He shares about the season that he's in and why he's stepping back in this season from the podcast. So yeah, if you want to hear two friends catch up, talk about the goodness of God, dive in deep to what faith is and what it means to us, and then catch up with what's going on in Derek's life, this is a good one. As always, share, tweet, write a review on iTunes. I really do love hearing from folks. I love your suggestions on who we might have on. Really honored to be on this journey with folks and catching up with friends along the way. So this is my conversation with who you all know and love, Derek Turner. Love you, man.
Yeah, so I'm reading this book called Becoming Human by John Bear.
Okay.
And oh my gosh,
Good?
Jason. Yeah. Randall Worley recommended it to me.
Okay.
And it's not even, I wouldn't even call it necessarily a book. It's a little thing of quotes and icons and statements and church fathers.
Wow.
But here, listen to this, and this is something I think it'd be good to. It goes in line with everything that you're talking about with the road to Emmaus and why they didn't recognize Jesus.
Yeah.
So he's talking about, basically, he said, consider how it is that the disciples came to know Christ is important for two reasons. And he says, first, it means there is no historical distance at all between those disciples back then and us. We are not at a disadvantage by not being there 2,000 years ago.
Right.
Being there did not help the disciples, and we delude ourselves if we think that we would have known better. In fact, in doing so, we place ourselves in the category of the demonically possessed, for they had no trouble recognizing Christ.
That's good.
Think about that. He says, by thinking that we would have known Christ prior to his suffering and resurrection, we would also deserve the rebuke given to Peter for having separated Christ from the cross. So his whole point here is that the disciples really didn't come to know Christ in the earthly walk. I mean, they kind of at times alluded to it, thought about it.
Sure.
But it really wasn't until Christ in you, the Holy Spirit came, that they were even able to recognize.
Yeah.
And like on the road to Emmaus, part of that recognition took place when Jesus himself opened their eyes to the scriptures.
Wow. Right. Yeah.
And so now that we have to ask that same question, like, okay, I'm going to have to let Jesus open my eyes to the scriptures, because I think I know what they say.
Yeah.
I think it's, and I've had people talk to me about this. Well, I think it's super important that we believe literally that Jonah was swallowed by a whale.
Right.
And I mean, I've been listening to a guy recently, Jared Bias. He's on the Bible for Normal People.
Okay.
And he wrote a whole book on Jonah.
Okay.
And he's fascinated by the story, the literature, everything. And Jesus himself alluded to Jonah, the story of Jonah. But whether or not an actual dude got swallowed by an actual fish, he's like, that's not even the point.
Yeah.
The point is, the story of God's mercy, the story of God's forbearance, and the story of ultimate redemption of Jesus himself being in the belly of the earth for 3 days on our behalf. And Jesus, when he alluded to the story, that's the part he alluded to.
Bro.
Was just like Jonah,
it was
the Son of Man will also
prophetic.
be.
Yeah.
And so, I think I think sometimes we argue over the things that don't matter.
Right.
And this is part of the thing I think I've gotten some pushback even by being on this podcast,
Right. Sure.
you get a little pushback from people about, well, I'm not sure about that guest that you brought on or that
Right.
person that you spoke
Right.
with. And I guess my big question is, why are people so afraid of hearing either other opinions or
Yeah.
doubts?
Yeah.
And I haven't come to a full conclusion, but I part of my conclusion, Sarah and I were just talking about this today, is that in our realm, doubt was basically sin.
Right. Right.
If you
Sure. Yeah.
doubted,
Yeah.
that was sin, which I've come to completely disagree with and say that certainty is
Yeah.
sin. You know, the sin of
Sure.
certainty, that you're certain about
Yeah.
everything. I mean, I've really kind of whittled it down to like, I'm certain that God came in the flesh and his name is
Yeah.
Jesus. And beyond that, man, then other stuff is up for discussion.
Right. Yeah, bro. There's so much there. I think what I love about the Emmaus Road approach, what you're talking about, is that everything there is about relationship. It's a heart to heart connection that's taking place. Uh, I think I started to go down that road. Then you took a left turn with with that last statement that you made. Like, why are people? How'd you say it? Why are they?
Why are people so fearful about doubt, or why are they so why is there so
That's
much
it. I
pushback
Yeah,
by the questions that are asked? And I feel like that's a big part of even my role as a pastor is
yeah,
to
yeah.
I want to help people ask better questions. I mean, I remember Bradley Jerzak, I think, said this years ago, and he said, this is why we have to go back to the patristic fathers and mothers of the church, is because they were wrestling with some really, really
Yeah.
big questions. Who is God? Who is Jesus? You know, uh, what just happened? What was this cross
Right, right.
and this burial and this resurrection and now this spirit? What is this all about? And so they're answering these huge questions. And then once they kind of answered those questions, then we started diving into like the nuance of church life. Paul
Yeah,
kind of deals with the nuance of church life and in that culture
yeah,
and in that
yeah,
century. And I think we need to go back and start asking some of the big questions because, and I've had this discussion before, but if God is in control in the way that we use the term control,
right.
and he allowed or caused this evil to happen in my life, then I don't want
Sure,
anything to do with
sure.
that God.
Yeah,
But I don't see that God in
yeah,
Jesus. And so my whole life now is to say, I'm going to let Jesus be my view of God. And then everything else is open for discussion. And then, of course, with the big caveat, hey, I could be wrong.
right, right.
But
Which is,
can we stay connected and have different
yeah,
convictions? Like, is that possible? That's where I'm at right now, is like, I really want to invite people into, and I feel like this is the shift that's happening
yeah,
in church
yeah,
life. If you're going to be staunchly certain about everything and everyone has to match your belief system, I think you're going to dwindle and go away. I just saw a Barna Group report that basically the churches that have embraced a really hardcore conservative save America culture, they grew tremendously during
sure.
COVID and
Wow,
beyond COVID,
sure.
is because they drew all these people in who truly probably were more excited about their power in of the political
Right.
realm.
Yeah,
And once it started kind of fading away and they started going off to the margins, and the secular culture that America is becoming postmodern, and really already is, um, they started thinking, oh man, we can't lose that power. We can't lose that
right.
power. Not realizing that what was happening was you're exposed. All that did was exposed where you had your trust and where you had
Yeah,
your hope.
right. Yeah,
And so, like, hey, come back to Jesus. Come back to the
yeah,
way of love.
yeah.
Come back to the way of being a kingdom citizen first and
Wow.
foremost, and not identifying with your quote, American heritage. Look, I've been all over the world. I mean, I have have nearly 2 million miles on American Airlines. Um, and, was executive platinum from all those years, and uh, just, went everywhere.
Right.
And I love this country. I love this
Yeah.
country, but not more than I love the kingdom and the fact that every person on the planet has a right to know that they have been rescued.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Bro.
just, something about that really gets to me. Um, and I think it was an exposing time. The word apocalyptic in the Greek is really just means an unveiling or an exposing. And a lot of people like to talk about, the whole Trump era. We're still talking about the whole Trump era, for God's sake. Can we just stop talking about all of it? But if you want my honest opinion, I think the one thing that the Trump presidency and era did for our country is it was an apocalyptic exposing of where people held their hope and their faith. And I'm with Sting on this one. Back when he was with the police, there is no political solution.
No.
Um, we are spirits in the material world.
Wow.
Uh, I just I just feel like it's an exposing, but to me that's a good thing,
Right.
because when light shines, now we can begin to see clearly.
Yeah.
And even if it's seen clearly that, man, you were wrong about that for a long time. I've had to expose myself to that same thought process and that same, critique. Derek, you've been wrong
Right.
about
Yeah.
this.
Over and over I've been.
And
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, right.
that's the thing, right? I was just watching an interview, and I'm going to botch his name, but it's Dr. Peter Bogason or something. He's an atheist professor who's been kicked out of the university he taught at in Oregon. Interviewed by, I had his name and I lost it while I was trying to get Peter's, Glenn Beck. So two very, very different people. Fascinating interview. And they were talking about critical thought
Okay.
and how it's been lost. Of course, it's been lost they're talking about the universities, and he really talks about universities as becoming cult-like and serving ideology and wokeism, and instead of actual critical thought, which is the ability to investigate the other point of view, to sit and have a conversation with someone who actually thinks completely opposite to you. And it's the foundation of being able to even have a clue where you're standing. And while they were talking, of course, I was thinking through the world we live in today, but mostly because of the space that I navigate in and the place that where I've got some grace on my life and maybe the right language to put around things. I think in the context of what's taking place in the church. And I think about how little we are able to sit in a room with someone who thinks differently than us, who has a completely different take on who God is.
Mm-hmm.
As a relational fellow who grew up in the context of this evangelical Western Enlightenment church, certainty has become our God, and it's become what you said. It's become how we prove our faith. Our conviction somehow is connected
Right.
to our certainty, instead of faith being the thing that ultimately takes us into truth. Faith is meant to take us into truth. It's meant to be that place where we gather around his goodness and we rediscover who he is. And I think the reason that there's so much fear that you're talking about, and I know it myself. I mean, I grew up in this church, man. There
Mm-hmm.
was the 21-year-old Jason knew a whole lot. The Bible college graduate knew a whole lot, and the fear of having to face the possibility that I'm wrong, because you begin to build on that. You begin to build a future on that. You begin to build, God speaks a promise over your life. And so you get down the road of what it looks like and you begin to build toward it, and then crashes and you have to make a decision. Did I hear God? Yes. Did I misinterpret? Clearly. What mean? It means that my understanding of who he is isn't the whole understanding of who he is, and he's infinitely better. And so now I have a decision to make. Do I double down on my understanding, or do I offer up my understanding and trust it to his goodness and walk further down the road? I think for me, the reason that I'm where I'm at today is because all along the way I've been convinced at the end of the day that God is a relational God. That's the piece that my parents gave to me, that the church has given to me.
Mm-hmm.
That all along the way, even though it's been almost every message and moment theory has yeast, and has transactional thinking, has punishment based approaches to God. For me, the reason that I'm where I'm at today is because uh, I discovered that God is love. He looks like Jesus, and he's always good. I mean, this is the thing that allows me to walk into any place and have a conversation, and even if all of the things that I think I know are under duress, I can be in that place and be in a place of peace and a place of rest,
Mm-hmm.
because my if I have a certainty, it is simple. It is Jesus. It's cruciform love. It's
Yep.
Christ crucified and risen, and I can put more and more language around it. But that has been the thing that's allowed me to have a conversation with anyone. I'm not worried about whether they're an atheist or not. I'm not worried about their ideology, their theology.
Right.
I'm not worried about my association with them, because
Mm-hmm.
none of that makes sense if you look at Jesus. I mean, the man was associated with, you name it.
Right.
And it didn't change who he was. It just allowed him to be there, to be love, to be confident, to be able to see from their perspective, and to get on that road with them, to walk down that road with them.
Right.
I think transactional understandings of God, when we build our house on transactional understandings of God, that's where the fear comes from. That's my thought.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's come in some pretty legitimate ways, with a lot of covenant teaching, which is good. I mean, when we look at the covenants, um, the which is a form of a transactional, if then,
Yeah,
if you do this, then this will happen. If you do this, then this will happen.
yeah,
The difference with the new covenant is it's exclusively between God.
that's right. That's right.
And honestly, he did it with Abraham as well, because
Yeah,
we have the typology there of Abraham. I didn't anticipate getting on this, but it just came to my mind. And when you say the word transactional, I'm trying to think of, like, how could people be so transactional minded? And I thought, is it because of our system of debits and credits, and the way that we do accounting, and the way that we just kind of like yin and yang and all that?
right.
But I think in the evangelical Christian world, we've been taught about covenants. Covenant language is just such a permeating teaching, and it's good. We should know about the covenants, but the difference in that covenant, and we see it in Abraham as well. I mean, he basically put Abraham to sleep, and then the Bible talks about this smoking furnace walking between the animals, and
Yep.
it was like God cut covenant with himself,
Yeah.
and he brought man into it. And then our connection to it is by faith. It's not by works. It's not by duty. It's not by law. Um, and then now the difference is there still is a New Testament law, the law of Christ. We read it in Galatians that we are to fulfill, carry one another's burdens, and therefore fulfill the law of Christ. And if you go back, well, what's the law of Christ? What is that? What does that mean? What law am I supposed to
Right.
follow? Well, I think Jesus switched it up, and kind of his pattern of, you've heard it said, but I say. And in John 13:35, he says, "A new commandment I'm giving to you. Here it is. This
Yeah.
is it. This is
Yeah.
the commandment. This
Yeah.
is the only one. Love one another the way I have loved you. By this, all men will you're my disciples." And I have just found that the more I embrace the command of love, which I believe was etched in my heart at that point of a faith connection with a loving Father, then I have the capacity now to love with the love of God. And of course, you even get pushback on that. I mean, I get so much pushback about teaching about love. Oh, well, can't be too much talking about
Yeah.
love, brother,
Yeah.
because love. Remember, love speaks the truth.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, no, actually, the truth is spoken in love.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You're even mixing that up. And I think we've been so. I really believe in this country, we have been so enamored with our central position of power, kind of in the evangelical circles. This is why I really loved um, Kristen Dumais' book, Jesus and John Wayne, just that historical look at kind of the religious right and how
Right.
this crept into this political ideology crept into the church, and it became our pathway towards restoring the nation, when it's like God's into restoring hearts and individuals and communities. And although I am 100% thankful, back to that, for the country that I live
Yeah.
in, I'm absolutely disgusted by the alliance, the unholy
Yeah.
alliance that churches have with the political spectrum. And it's on both sides. It's right and left. And this is my whole point, is like, if you're on that spectrum and that's what you identify with, then there's only one thing to do, and that's shoot at the person on the other side. Um, Whereas if we are in this kingdom perspective, or this kingdom spectrum, we rise above. Our citizenship is in the kingdom. And as a kingdom citizen, I can drop down on the spectrum all along right and left,
Yeah.
and I can love people,
Yeah.
and I can discuss things with them in a way that, I honestly, the civil discourse and the discussion about important issues, it's rare.
Yeah. It is.
It's rare. And I think it's something that we've had on this podcast. And this is something that we've wanted to open people's eyes to, is that we can talk about things that are difficult, or maybe we don't even fully agree with, or we don't even fully understand, but we can let someone else talk, and we can listen, and we can have our own convictions, but stay connected.
Yeah.
And it goes into every realm. For me, this comes back to my whole thinking about being human affirming.
I love that.
There's this one thing that, to me, that bonds all of us on this planet, and it's the fact that we're human. And the thing that makes it most beautiful for me is it's what God became.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
became human. So if you want to look at the one thing that God validated and the one thing he affirmed you as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if your identity is wrapped up in anything beyond that, it's kind of a subcategory. And
Yeah.
it's not that we want to lose all diversity. I think diversity is great. I love the diversity of opinion, of skin color, of
Yeah.
sexuality. I mean, we're in the midst of this conversation right now. But if
Right.
you focus on your identity exclusively as a man, or as a woman, or as gay or straight, or exclusively my identity is 100% as an evangelical Christian, and
Yeah.
or a Democrat, that's a shallow thing to place your identity in, and it can't carry
Yeah.
the weight of your identity
No.
like
No.
human can. Human, and I guess I'll take it further. Human, seated with Christ in heavenly places. Christ embedded in you, the hope of glory. Now that can carry an identity.
Yeah. Yeah. And a value and a worth. Man, I love this, man. I've missed you. I've missed these
Yeah,
conversations. You're
yeah.
fired up. You got it.
I am. Well, I've had a bit of a good rest and a lot of time to think.
Oh, we'll talk about definitely what's going on in your life. I was just in Miami, and we talked about it a little bit a month ago for Formula One, right? Um,
Yeah, bro.
Pretty cool to be down there. And I have family that works for Mercedes, Team Mercedes. I have a brother-in-law who works for the Mercedes Formula One team. So got to go in the back paddock area and get to be with the stars and see all. So we've talked about this, but
Which
uh,
I'm actually very jealous about.
it was pretty
I've been
cool.
watching the Formula One series on Netflix, and my
Yeah,
brother-in-law
yeah,
is really, really into it. And when he heard what you got to do, he was like, "Oh
bro.
my gosh, no way!"
I know, man. It's unbelievable. It's crazy too because it really is exploding, and I keep getting folks who are like, I can't believe you were. I'm like, yeah, it was pretty intense. Got to see Toto and the cars, and really straight up got to be where we sat. Michelle Obama sat the next day. It was a
Love it.
pretty cool experience. And then of course watching the race, but that while I was down there, I was hanging out with some friends. We're at a dinner, and I get talking with a fellow that I've known for, I don't know, 8 years, and he's an atheist. and we're talking, Jesus comes up at the table. And so we're all kind of talking about Jesus, and people are giving their authentic, real thoughts about him. And of course, more than Jesus, they're really talking about the church and how Jesus has been represented to them. And that kind of leads to a conversation just between the two of us. And we're sitting there and we're talking, and it becomes this really authentic, cool thing because we've earned each other's trust over the last several years. And so he says, Jason, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a third generation atheist. And I chuckle. I say, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a fifth generation pastor. And we start laughing. And he started to share with me. He said, my real issue with Jesus is the church. My real issue with Jesus is how he's taught as love, and yet I see and experience so much unkindness. He's not an American, but he's looking at America. And of course, America represents a great deal of who Jesus is to him. And that church that has been exposed even in these last years as hypocritical, we serve a God of love, but we are often at war, with everything and everyone. And so he says, I have this picture of Jesus that's been represented to me by the church, and I agree with him. I'm like, man, I totally understand where you're coming from. I began to ask him what moved him, what he was living for, and he began to tell me about the value of kindness. The conversation came around to this lack of kindness within the church and this value for kindness that both he and I had. And I said, both of us have a value for kindness, and really what that says is both of us have a high value for humanity. And at that point, we found something we could gather around, that thing that you're talking about, that high value for humanity. And I was able to begin to say, the Jesus that I know is a cruciform love Jesus that is all about a high value for humanity. The whole point is this value for humanity, that God became human, that he dwelt with us, that he experienced what we experienced, lived in the sense of brokenness, lived in the sense of separation, and experienced desperation, experienced fear, experienced all these things, but lived as an expression of this oneness with love. It was a really cool conversation because at the end, I was able to say, we both actually have the same religious point of view. Our value is for humans. We both can gather around that.
Right.
It was a pretty cool conversation. I'm not real concerned about whether or not he claims to be an atheist or not. I'm really concerned that he knows I love him.
Well, and that's I've actually tweeted this out and thrown this comment in some conversations I've been having recently, and that is that the whole emphasis of the evangelical church. I mean, the reason it's evangelical is because evangelism is the number one thing. We have to get people saved. We have to get people saved. And so when you become more concerned with getting someone saved than loving someone well, you're doing it backwards. Because loving people well will lead them to the one that loves them well and is their savior.
Yeah.
And so somewhere along the way, we lost it with this hyper focus on you must be saved.
Yeah.
And of course, the average person is like, well, saved from what?
Right.
Right. Well, you're sin because you're a sinner and you're going to hell. And it's like, at that point, the moment you shift from you're a sinner, you're going to hell, you just stepped out of the good news.
Yeah.
You literally said I'm not going to use the good news to, lure you. Now I'm going to lure you through hell and sin.
Yeah.
When in reality, to me, this is where it comes back to the bigger questions. If God is exactly like Jesus and has always been exactly like Jesus, then we've got some serious questions to ask ourselves about our relationship with our Bibles, about our following of Jesus. And this is where I've actually tried to embed the terminology that I'm a follower of Jesus. Not that I'm not, I'm afraid of using the term Christian, but it's been so maligned. There's nowhere that the term Christian shows up in secular culture in a positive light. It just doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's maligned. And it, and I think that none of the disciples were actually called Christians until Antioch. Jesus wasn't certainly called a Christian. He was the Christ.
Wasn't that his last name? I thought that was his last
Yeah,
name.
right. But it's a simple thing for me, because when you make that transition and you just even change the language, if someone's a follower, they're saying humbly, I'm pursuing the one that has pursued me with his love,
Yeah,
because I'm drawn to this love that was willing to become human,
yeah,
was willing to enter into my skin and know what it's like to be me.
yeah,
And when you start talking like that,
yeah,
I think that's when people's conscience, almost like something in them, comes alive, and they're like, wow, wait a second. You mean God, he knows what it's like to be me, and he still loves me
yeah,
completely and totally.
yeah, yeah,
Now faith can be placed like the seed that it is. And to me, faith is a seed, and it needs to be firmly planted in the love of God.
yeah.
We've been taught, and look, I can probably outdo just about anybody listening to this podcast on word of faith teaching. I guarantee between my wife and me, I've sat through more word of faith teaching
Uh-huh.
than anybody listening to this podcast right now. And I challenge you to prove me wrong. And faith was always something that needed to be exercised. It was a muscle. Faith was a fuel tank, and you
Yep.
had to get that muscle strong so that Jesus would say, oh, whoa, you great faith. And he wouldn't say, oh, you of little faith, or where is your faith?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the fuel tank example of like, well, the more I read my Bible, the more I have faith,
Yeah.
and I'm filling up my faith tank. I don't think it's either one of those things. I think faith is a seed, and if the smallest seed of faith, according to Mark 11, can move a mountain,
Yeah.
a mustard-sized seed
Yeah.
of faith can
Yeah.
move a mountain,
Yeah.
then really, to me, it's more about, where am I placing this minuscule little amount of faith that I have? Where am I placing it? And I am firmly placing it in the fact that my Father loves me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in the love of God. Now, it
Yeah.
can grow from there,
Yeah.
but don't tell me you're going to do things
Well,
to increase your faith independent of the one whose faith it is.
yeah. And I love the word follower, man, because follower, it literally means you have to be open-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
It means you have to be constantly in sync, aware of your union. It's this, oh, we're turning left, oh, we're turning right. I think faith in that mustard seed context is, that's the story where Jesus is up on the Mount of Transfiguration, and he's had this powerful encounter. It's on display, kind of a manifestation of the presence of God. Lightning, his face lights up. The Peter, James, and John are up there, and I think Elijah and Moses are up there as well. That moment, and down at the base of the mountain are the rest of the boys. And as Jesus is coming down, he runs across, the father whose son is being thrown into the fire by a spirit, and is oppressed. And he had taken his boy to get healed, but Jesus wasn't there, so he'd had some of the boys at the base of the mountain pray for him. They couldn't cast out the demon. So then he confronts Jesus on the way down the mountain, and he says, Jesus, could you heal my son? And the story. Jesus, how long must I be with you? He looks out, at the group of people there. He's like, oh, and then he heals the boy. But this is the piece, right? Later the disciples ask Jesus, they say, hey, how come we couldn't do that? Which I love the question. It kind of insinuates that there was an expectation that they should have been able to do this as well. But Jesus says this, he says, because you have so little faith.
Mm-hmm.
And in the context of transactional thinking, so little faith, you could pause there. And if he says you have so little faith, the next question we would ask in the context of transaction is, well, how much do I need?
Right.
Because that's the setup. But Jesus wasn't operating in the context of transaction. He was operating in the context of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
He was operating in the context of oneness, of union, of only saying and doing what he saw his Father doing and saying, and only doing the things that were in his heart, because this was this relational thing that was taking place. And so we hear transaction, we think, oh, we need more faith. And then Jesus says, you have so little faith. He's speaking to us in the language of our understanding. He's using the language of transaction and measurements. The disciples say, how much faith do we need? And Jesus blows the whole transactional thing up by saying, oh, just the faith of a mustard seed. He picks the smallest thing possible and then tells us, if you had that faith, you, like you said, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there. Nothing would be impossible for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that now and I think, oh, I used to think faith was uh, an amount, and even if you had the smallest amount of a mustard seed, you could do something impossible. But that wasn't the point. Jesus wasn't saying, oh, you just need this much faith. Because honestly, if I had to measure my faith to Jesus, and I couldn't measure up. Like there's no amount of faith I could measure up. What Jesus was saying wasn't about measurements. It wasn't about transaction. He was saying, hey, faith is connected to your awareness of your union. Faith is connected to your relational understanding of where you are with God. Faith is
Mm-hmm.
the fruit or the evidence of our oneness. It is out of union, it is out of oneness that you can speak to something. And
Right.
it's not this measurement based thing, it's a measureless thing. It's this invitation into who he is and who we are, and into oneness, into union, into that John 17, I pray that we would be one. And suddenly you're having this conversation, and we're not trying to get into faith, we're not trying to get into God, we're actually living in an awakening, a greater, increasing awakening of this oneness with him. And then in that oneness, we can speak to the impossible, move from here to there, and nothing's impossible for you. It takes the idea of a tank, because you're saying, oh, you got a faith tank or a muscle, right? Which means everything about faith is on us.
Right.
And
Right. That's my point.
somehow we can muscle up, like somehow, love needs to do push-ups before it loves, as opposed to, oh no, we're in relationship, we're in oneness, we're awakening to it. And Jesus was so aware of his union that he was able to speak to any impossibility, any area, and speak the Father's perspective on it, speak identity, speak healing, speak life, speak wholeness. Nothing was impossible, because he was living from this abundance, from this place of union, instead of trying to get to it. It's that's why the gospel is such good news, I think.
Yeah, and I think our tactics of evangelism have just been way off. Um, you know, I think I have more traction with say people in my neighborhood who I've been here 20 years in the same house.
Right.
I know all my neighbors. We've talked about this before, but man, we have some of the best conversations, and we absolutely do not agree on every little thing. And they know
Sure.
who I am and what I do. And yet there's this openness and this relationship because we really love one another. Like
Yeah.
I'm in a neighborhood that we really love one another. I mean, this to me is almost like I don't know, feels like a community that I would really want to hang with and be a part of. Uh,
Right.
and this is what I have a dream for the church of the coming years, would make a transition from certainty to openness, for allowing questions, allowing doubt. um, you know I think the central focus on Jesus, for me, that's never going to go away. That's my cornerstone. You can burn everything down, and I'm placing my faith on that cornerstone.
Right.
But as far as just a disciple or a follower of Jesus, if I'm truly going to follow him, then love your enemies is still a thing. And I got to tell you, I hear about Jesus whipping people in the temple more than I hear about love your
Yeah.
enemies, because it's like, well, Jesus did this and he did that. And it's like, okay, so you're saying there was things he did independent of love, that does not
Right.
loving. And of course, they'll, well, no, here's why it was love. And here's why me, fighting the culture war
Right.
against my neighbors or against
Right.
all the people that I disagree with is why I'm loving them. It's because, well, I'm speaking truth. I'm speaking truth. It's like, yeah, but kindness has gone out the window. And there's some really disturbing scriptures about that. The chapter on love in Corinthians that basically says, you can give your body to be burned.
Hmm.
You can prophesy
Yeah.
and speak in
Yeah.
tongues of men and of angels. And if you have not love, you're
Yeah.
bankrupt. Jesus himself talked about,
Yeah.
these that will come to me saying, didn't we prophesy? Didn't we do this? Didn't we
Yeah. Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
which I think most people align their faith with.
Yeah.
My faith is what I do. And he's like, who are you? Like, I don't even know you. Um, Now, James comes along and says, faith without works is dead. But what is the work of faith if it isn't love?
Right.
Faith is activated by
I
love. Faith works
yeah.
by love.
Yeah.
Faith speaks the truth in
Yeah.
love. Um, if we're not heading towards love, and here's the other thing that I think people neglect is somebody in our circles, in our world, that operates in kindness. Um, do you think that's something that's just humanly generated? Oh, there's a general human
Right.
kindness, and that, what I think? I think that's my opportunity to call out the God identity in that
Yeah.
person
Absolutely. Yeah.
and say, "Man, you're so kind.
Yeah.
Where does that come
Yeah.
from? How are you so kind in the face of a difficult situation that I just saw?" And I've been more deliberate about trying to like identify these things in people,
Yeah.
no matter where I'm at,
Yeah.
and to say, "Hey, can I ask you a question? I just saw the interaction you had with that customer. Maybe I'm at a store, and how did you manage to stay so self controlled and calm and kind in the midst of that kind of vitriol that was coming against you?"
Right.
And of course, they'll give you all kinds of things. Well, we're trained to do this, or I've done this for so long. I know that there's just certain people you're not gonna. And then I'll just say, well, that's cool, but I think that God has equipped you to be that way.
Yeah.
And
That's so
all of a
good,
sudden
bro.
they're like, wait a second,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Yeah. I think kindness is the well, you can't give away what you don't have, right? It's the evidence of God within you. Karen and I, we do whenever we don't do this a lot, and this is not for anyone listening an opportunity to reach out to us, but we have done some premarital counseling, um, and our heart, we talk about everything when we're in a room with a couple. We talk about everything, but our heart is always and only after one thing, right? We got 27 years of marriage, and our heart is our one hope for that couple is that they would practice and know kindness.
Yeah.
Because we've discovered it's the key to everything. It unlocks everything. It's it encourages every future hope, it heals pain, disarms anger, dismantles trust. It's the thing that empowers us to connect. Kindness is the scripture says it's what leads to repentance.
Wow. Yeah,
It's
that's it.
it it's the kindness of God that actually changes the way we think, and we're transformed. Romans also says we're transformed, but when we change the way we think. So I'm convinced every issue in the world today requires somebody walking into it with kindness, because
Mhm.
you can't change a person's mind without it. You can't find connection. Kindness is to me the soil on which trust grows, and trust is the commodity it's what we were created for, and an absolute necessity for connection. An absolute necessity for anything to work, whether it's governments or institutions or anything. But my goodness, in the context of relationship, without kindness, there's no trust, and without trust, you can't find connection. You can't move forward. So I really think that the answer to the question that aches in the heart of humanity is the kindness of God that would lead us to change the way we think, and it requires of people, regardless of where they're from, regardless of what they're navigating, what denomination or non-denomination or outside of I'm convinced that it's kindness that steps into a situation
Mm.
and creates the atmosphere and the culture for which things can shift and move and be changed, and hearts and minds are transformed.
Yeah.
And even that story of Jesus in the temple, and he goes in that, people that are looking for justification for their cruelty and and their partnership with punishment.
Their
You
wrath.
know, the
Their
thing I'm writing,
yeah.
their wrath,
Yep.
looking for, the book I'm writing, it's juxtaposing a reconciling God with a retributive God at the cross, and
Right.
basically saying there's one of which two ways you can go. You can either move toward
I
reconciliation.
believe that's chapter 4, Jason, an oscillating God.
That's right.
Am I
Or you
wrong?
can move toward, you're not wrong, or retribution. But the point being that, oh, I lost it. What was I going to say?
Sorry, dude, I threw you.
That even at the temple, when Jesus goes into the temple, and you're using that to justify your punishing view of life and God, and your wrath and your anger, and even your anger at true injustice, which there was a true injustice taking place in the temple. I think Jesus was upset about it. Clearly he was upset. He spent the whole day braiding a whip. He was very in control of himself when he did it. But I'm fascinated by this right here. The fact that when Jesus walked in there and he flipped tables, of course, it doesn't ever say he struck anyone. So
Yeah.
that's just extracurricular activity you're adding to the story. It says he
Yep.
drove them out. But even as he was driving them out, Jesus didn't do anything outside of cruciform love.
Mm-hmm.
So as he's doing it in the context of I am going to a cross to lay my life down for the people that I am moved on behalf of, and also for the fellas on the other side of the table that I'm flipping.
Sure.
And to me, that's the kindness that actually has any authority on it. So that if you are going to go in swinging, if you will, if you are going to go in somewhere and it requires that form of strength, and I see you do this all the time on Twitter, it requires a rebuke, or hey, we're going to go after this. We're going to go after this injustice. It's done from the place of kindness, cruciform love, that kindness
Mm-hmm.
that goes to a cross, that lays his life down for you, that is willing to surrender, because we understand that's the love that changes. That's the kindness that changes the world, man.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was just thinking about Jesus' story of the Good Samaritan and how closely linked mercy and justice is with showing kindness. It was the Samaritan that was prompted by kindness
Yeah,
and
yeah,
um, went to the person,
yeah,
and that kindness, it turned into other things. It
yeah,
turned into other manifestations
yeah,
of God's character, and it brought the kind of you know healing, and it also, Jesus used it as an amazing story to basically say, hey, listen, which one of these people, and he contrasted with the people who knew better.
yeah.
They had all the head knowledge of the law and God, and they had it all figured out, but their behavior didn't match what they claimed to be their belief system.
Huh.
And then I see that a lot.
Yeah,
I think a lot of it's the reason why Gandhi would make a statement like, yeah, Jesus I love, but his followers I have an issue with. and uh I'm honestly not concerned about Jesus's reputation. I'm not here
no,
to defend his reputation,
no,
but I want to get in on his life and his character, and I want to be someone who is becoming like Jesus.
yeah, amen.
This is why I use the term follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I do like to use irony to point out hypocrisy at times. I was thinking about an interaction I had with a guy, and he wrote this. He asked this question: who has lost credibility more in the past years? And he lists experts, journalists, or politicians. And then he had a tweet thread there, and he said, that was a trick question. The answer is yes,
Right,
to all of them.
right.
And so I hit back and I said, hey, you forgot
Yeah,
pastors.
yeah. The church, the
Who's
institution.
lost credibility in the past few years. And he said this, and this is where I like to use nuance and irony to kind of like just bring a different view of the conversation and try and say, okay, I need to love the person that wrote this tweet as much as
Yeah,
you know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
And he said, well, pastors didn't lose credibility, hirelings did.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, I immediately hit me right away. I knew exactly. I was like, well, the world doesn't know the difference between pastors and hirelings.
Right.
Educated theologians
Yeah.
know what that term means. The world doesn't know the difference.
Right.
And so I just said, hey, and this person is a former pastor.
Sure.
And I said, well, I guess we'll have to stick around and be faithful like some of the good experts, journalists, and politicians.
Right.
And just brought it back to,
Sure.
you're not going to get anywhere by just critiquing the culture all the time.
Yeah.
You got to call people to a higher identity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and this is how Jesus is seen in the world today. I think he's seen in the actions of the Good Samaritan. This is where faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
But those works aren't to show or prove that you have some kind of enormous faith. I mean, whose faith is it anyway?
Yeah.
We've been talking about faith, and
And
Paul said this: "I live by the faith of the Son of God who
yeah.
loved me and gave Himself for me." I'm not living by my own faith.
And let's get some context too. Jesus lived 33 years, and for the first 30 years, he didn't have any works.
Yeah, right.
So, so was he faithless for 30 years and then faithful for 3, or is faith the fruit of your union? And works is just evidence. Works is the evidence that you're. When I hear faith without works, the old Jason, who was raised in the context of transactional thinking, often that was woven into the teaching. I immediately feel this shame or condemnation come over me because I certainly don't have enough works. I mean, I'm looking at my life going, well, I can do this, I can do that. It's that joke that that Paul Young told me about the pastor that gets to heaven. He's at the gate with Peter, and Peter says, "All right, good to see you." And the pastor's like, "Hey, I just what do I need to show to get in?" And Peter says, "You need 100 points." He says, "Okay, well, I pastored for 50 years." Peter's like, "All right, that's great. 1 point." So the pastor's like, "Oh no!" She's like, "Well, I went to the soup kitchen and he's like, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll give you a point for that." He's starting to sweat. He's like, "I read my Bible every day." He's like, "Yeah, everybody does that. I'm sorry, I can't give you anything for that." Around that time, a plumber who the pastor knows walks by and just walks right in and waves to Peter. Hey, Peter walks in and he looks at Peter. And he's like, "Hey, why does he just get to go in?" And Peter looks at the pastor and says, he's not playing this game.
I love it.
He's not playing this game. It's that faith by works. I would feel that thing come on me and I would be like, I don't have enough works. But all of a sudden, you shift and you realize that works is the overflow. It's that whole idea that love doesn't have to do push-ups. If we're becoming like him, it just happens. It escapes us. It's this awakening to who he is that just is an expression of how we live our day, and an awareness when we aren't.
Wow.
When I am short, when I have turned it off, when I am unkind, it's so obvious that I can immediately recognize it. Go to the person and say, "I'm sorry. Forgive me. I just raised my voice. I was short." I just the other day we were out on the boat. I got short with one of the kids. It wasn't like I needed to spend. Somebody had to bring it to my attention.
Yeah.
It was immediate. I am so sorry.
Wow.
And yeah, I'll do later on. I'll check my heart, figure out where that came from. But that is not who I am. I am so sorry. Let's take care of that mess right now so it doesn't have an opportunity to it's not rocket science. Love isn't rocket science. We receive it and then we become it and we give it away. I love that, man. And I love the conversation of faith because for most of my life, it really was an outside in. It was how can I point to my works? And I think, man, Jesus was the most faithful guy on the planet. He did a lot of stuff, but he always did it from.
Yeah, honestly, that the word translated faith, pistis in the Greek, it really can also pertain to faithfulness. So it's not necessarily a momentary burst of powerful faith. We get that impression when we hear Jesus say, "Oh, this person had great faith," the centurion, or
right,
or where is you of little faith? We think quantity.
right.
What if we started thinking in terms of longevity? And
Yeah.
like, man, great faith is to remain faithfully connected to the idea and the thought that God is love, and I'm resting 100% of my trust in his love, no matter what I'm going through,
Bro,
no matter the
bro.
circumstances that come against me, the evil that happens to
That's
me,
it.
um, the even the evil that comes out of me, the unkindness, the wrath, the retribution,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm coming back
Oh,
to
that's
that.
good.
I'm gonna stay faithful to believing that all of this rests in the love of God. I was reading in Ephesians 3 in the
Faithfully connected, you said, man. So good. Go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that to me, that's more of like where faith is a positional, geographic thing. I
Yeah.
have my faith placed here
Yeah.
and I'm not moving it from that location.
Yeah.
And so that's what infuses me with the really the power of love.
Yeah.
And Paul said it in Ephesians 3 in the Passion. He says, "So I kneel humbly in awe before my Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the perfect Father of every father and child in heaven and on earth." And here's his prayer: "I pray that he would unveil within you the unlimited riches of his glory and favor until supernatural strength floods your innermost being with his divine might and explosive power." And here's how it happens. Then, by constantly using your faith, the life of Christ will be released deep inside of you, and the resting place of his love will become the very source and root of your life.
Hmm.
And,
Wow.
it goes on to talk about that this love is greater, higher, deeper, wider than anything we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
imagine. But he says, but you'll begin to understand it. And here's what he said: with all the saints.
Yeah. That's good.
And I think our gathering of with all the saints has been more about trying to gather around doctrine, which will never
No.
bring unity,
No.
never,
No.
as opposed to gathering around the love of the Father,
Yeah.
gathering around
Yeah.
the gospel. I mean, I even wonder if people who use the term gospel know what they're talking about.
Right.
They
Right.
say, "Well, you got to preach the gospel, brother. You got to preach the gospel." And I
Right.
want to ask them, like,
What?
would you just tell me what's your definition of the gospel?
Yeah.
Because nothing I hear coming from you is good news.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, let's go back and start asking some of those really, really big questions. And I'm going to start with the question: who is God?
Yeah. That's the
I
question.
don't think people have fully answered that yet.
No.
And if they have, I don't think they fully believe it,
No.
that God is Jesus in the flesh.
Yeah.
God became one of us. God was in Christ reconciling the world to
Yeah.
himself, full of
Yeah.
the Spirit,
Yeah.
never separated.
Yeah.
This radical, loving union called Father, Word, and Spirit
Yeah.
stepped into time as a human being to prove of the value and love for human beings. And it was the only possible rescue plan. And now death becomes our new birth. This is the beauty of it now. I mean,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about, and John Bear gets into this in his book Becoming Human.
Yeah.
I'd recommend this to everybody. But he gets into that the early church fathers and mothers really saw death as becoming truly human. You didn't become truly human until you experienced death. Now, dude, sit on that one for a while,
Right.
because it's only through and you know what? That's another thing that unifies us. And it's not to be morbid or anything, because as a follower of Jesus, I'm not afraid of death, and
Yeah.
it's inevitable.
Yeah.
This is the reason Sarah and I have been taking a break the last month. My father-in-law passed away suddenly of a massive stroke, and it was a Sunday morning. Sarah left church to go check on him with a friend of his and found him on the floor. He'd been laying there for quite a long time.
Mm.
It's horrific. It's
Yeah.
the worst possible scenario
Yeah.
for a daughter to walk in
Mm.
and see her father incapacitated like that, and having been there for a very long time.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so we've just decided, I mean, we need to step back.
Yeah.
We're not going to preach for this whole month.
Yeah.
Thank God for an amazing group of elders and leaders in our church that can step in and speak and give us a chance to just grieve and work through
Right.
this.
Yeah.
But the more I think about it, my father-in-law's name is Bill. man, Bill is doing great. It's the rest of us down here
Yeah.
that rightfully, and like Paul said, hey, he was talking about Onesimus, I think, and he said if he had died, he was sick unto death, and if he had died, I would have had sorrow upon
Yeah.
sorrow.
Yeah.
Death is something that brings sorrow, not just to us, but to the heart of God, because it never was supposed to be.
Right.
But now we have a God who is love, and he basically smuggled love into death. And now death, all it is a way to become truly human. It's the way to truly
Yeah.
become ultimately human.
Yeah. Wow.
And I believe that's the case for every person who is called a human being on the planet. I got into this conversation with someone on Twitter the other day, and they were like, you know, um, God God died for, I forget what the conversation was, but basically I said, wait, you mean he died for all sinners, right? Or he died for all? And she goes, no, he only died for those that believe.
Right.
I don't believe Jesus died for all.
Right.
And I just thought, like, that's honestly formal heresy right there.
Sure. Yeah. But it's actually, there's so many folks who, if they haven't thought it through, actually believe that.
Yeah, right. And
No.
so
Yeah.
I think that's something that kind of belief system, you know what? Maybe it's true. I mean, maybe Calvin was right, and there's only a certain number that God ordained to predestined to be saved, and he actually predestined others to be damned and participants in his wrath. If that's indeed true, then I don't want anything to do with that.
Right.
I absolutely don't
Right.
want anything to do with it. Uh, I actually have a little more of a, I don't know, maybe call it a, I don't want to call it rebellious. Maybe I want to call it intellectually honest.
I think so.
That um, if indeed the God that Jesus claims to um, have been in him, with him, in John 16, he said, on that day, you will know. He's talking to his disciples. He said, on the
Yeah.
day that I'm raised again and you see me again raised,
Yeah. Yeah.
on that day, you will know I am in the Father is in me, and I am in you. The level of oneness that he just amped it up
Right.
to me, that brought all humanity in.
Yeah.
And if it's God's will that all be saved, why can't that also be my will? Even if it's not true, even
Yeah.
if it's okay, I don't know, maybe 80% of people, for all mankind, for all time, will be saved. Um, why is it wrong to hope for 100%?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
because Jesus talked about hell, and Jesus talked about this and talked about that. Um, I, you know, why can't I believe in this
Right.
type of
Right. Well,
overarching, and I will say it this way, universal salvation?
yeah.
I am hopefully inclusive.
Yeah. That's where I'm
That
at too. Yeah.
that is a price, or not. I don't even want to use price, because price gets back into transactional thought. That's my old. That's
Right.
the
Right. Yeah.
old
We're
Christianese coming out there.
finding language.
Um, but to recognize a God that would be willing to become his creation so that he could blow death up from the inside out, and death now becomes a doorway to true life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
then
profound.
who does that not apply to? Well, I can first of all say I don't know, because I haven't been on the other side of death.
Yeah.
But I know my father-in-law has, and I know that he would not be considered maybe the most successful Christian on the planet. But man, he exhibited more fruit of the spirit than any person I've ever known.
Wow.
And
That
I'm
sounds
tired of the gauge of success being aligned with the size of a
right.
congregation, or
Right.
the
Right.
amount of money or
Yeah.
reach or influence that you have. I mean, the whole Mars Hill thing with Mark Driscoll, he kept coming back to that. He kept coming back to, well, look at the success. Look at the
Right.
success.
Right.
And it's like,
As
okay,
if
well,
that.
maybe that's not success because you're an absolute jerk.
Yeah.
Like, change
Yeah.
your,
Yeah.
your motive, your disposition.
Yeah.
And quit with the whole success talk. I mean, to me, if success is loving well, then that's the one I'm after.
Yeah. That's it.
And I'm not there yet. I mean, I'm this whole time with my wife, now I'm just getting really transparent. It's been really difficult. I mean, we have
Yeah.
walked through some really, really difficult stuff with her dad passing away. It's one of the reasons why I've been needing to take a break from this podcast. I mean,
Right.
I love our conversations,
Yeah.
Jason. You
Me
know
too, bro.
that.
Yeah.
And I want to have a church that is open to questions and fears and doubts, but that's
Right.
centered in on the love of Jesus. But um, walking that out is another matter. And when the rubber meets the road, a lot of times the people that you love the most and that you feel safest with are the ones that you drop the spirit led life. You you engage with something that's unkind. You
Right.
engage with something that is, trying to prove a point instead of stay connected.
Right.
And this is the thing Sarah and I have been really walking through. And thank God, look, we've been married 25 years. Yeah, don't send me therapy and counseling recommendations. We're okay. We're doing
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But these are the kind of things I think you walk through that help you really understand what matters, what
Wow.
really, really matters.
Right.
And you know
Wow.
the pursuit of love because you've been pursued by love,
Yeah.
that's what matters to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, bro. I mean, we've talked about it, but I can't imagine the loss of a father. And I knew him a little bit because I've been to the church a handful of times, and we've had some lovely conversation. He was a phenomenal human being, and so even more so, just the sense of loss and how that might impact all the different dynamics. And I do imagine, um, there's those moments where you stop and you realize what you just said. This is why I'm here. I'm here for my wife. I'm here for my kids. I'm
Mm,
here to have connection. I'm here, uh, connection being the highest goal. And you can lose that along the way. I'm so thankful to Karen because Karen has been, she's been a reminder to me all along the way that connection is the highest goal.
mm-hmm.
She's a big reason why we have the saying in our house that family is the long game.
Mm,
It's we're not here to do anything other than life together. And connection is how we'll do this. And so we can put aside some of how I've gotten here theologically is because you get squeezed into situations where your ideology is confronted. You
mm-hmm.
have foundational beliefs around, what scripture says about A, B, C, whether it's
Right.
sexuality or it's, abortion, or you have these foundational certainties, and then you do life in connection with your friends and your family, and you live in the context of their circumstances. You put yourself empathetically and compassionately within their
Yeah.
experiences, and you suddenly love inundates you, and for the sake of connection you don't step away from love, you lean deeper into it.
Right.
But it forces you to go, am I going to choose connection, or for the sake of my what I'm building, or for the sake of my ego, or for the sake of the ministry, or for the sake of XYZ, am I going to set that aside? And I'm grateful to you, man. You're a man who's walks faithfully, looking to connect with folks, looking to stay connected, and I learn a lot from you, and I love this podcast for that reason. How this podcast kind of started, and
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of what we run down and talk about, I probably wouldn't, if I were, to be honest, if I were a part of a church right now in the traditional sense. I'm certainly a part of the church. But
Yeah.
if I was a part of the church right now, in the sense that I was there every Sunday speaking from the platform, and I'm not in this moment, uh, because of my heart for connection, I might not chase down some of these thoughts, but because I know I can do so without stepping on toes, um, I'm able to run down some things and chase things down, and so I
Yeah.
love doing it with you. So
Well, and I love doing it with you, Jason. This has been such a great time, and and this isn't the end. I mean,
sure,
there definitely be going to be other conversations. I just wanted to,
yeah,
let our audience and the people we've been talking to know and understand what what's taking place just in my life personally, and why I really need to step away for a while. But while you were talking, it's so funny how, because I know the Bible really well. I've
yeah,
grown up
yeah, you
around the
do,
Bible my entire life.
yeah. I love
Uh,
talking with you because you can pull the reference right
while
out.
you're talking, and you were talking about, um, you know, loving Karen and your kids, and we're getting engaging in this conversation about, hey, where the rubber meets the road. Like, how am
Right,
I doing this with
right, right,
my
right,
family?
right.
I can almost hear the pharisaical voice. And the reason is because I used to be one,
Right,
until I
right.
had a pharisectomy. I was a really good Pharisee. So
uh,
I can hear, I can go back and hear that Pharisee voice every now and then. I could hear people be, well, what about Matthew chapter 10, where it says, whoever loves father and mother, son and daughter more than me is not fit to be my disciple. And I mean, now knowing Jesus the way I know
I
Jesus, I'm
know.
like, hey, bro, do you think that was maybe a little hyperbole there?
Yeah.
You think maybe
What do you
Jesus was
think?
not just
Yeah,
being super literal?
yeah.
Um, and I mean, that's fine. Okay, great.
I mean,
Abandon.
Jesus's mother was at his death, so yeah, he didn't divorce her. He was still there. So
Yeah,
maybe there was something
right.
else he was saying. Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
I just feel like there is an opportunity, and of course, I'm an idealistic person. I'm focused on opportunity, future. I'm pretty positive in my
yeah,
life. Um, I really feel like there's a great opportunity for the church right now
yeah. I agree.
to embrace the big questions and invite people into a discussion and a conversation. I've actually had a thought, I'll tell you this story real quick.
Yeah,
When we first started the church that we first planted in 2003, it's called the Branch Family Church. You
yeah.
remember?
We were there. Yeah,
Get planted, grow strong, branch out. That was our motto. And man, talk about the trappings of success. We grew to 600 people pretty
yeah.
quickly. We were dealing in literally millions and millions of dollars. We were buying land. We were starting a Christian school. I mean, all the stuff.
Yep.
I was running and gunning in a direction that God was like somewhere in the background saying, "Hey, yeah, I'll be here when you're done. Come back and meet me here." But you know the story. We had to completely close that
Yeah,
down and
yeah,
had to just shut it down. And I was questioning whether I was even a pastor anymore.
yeah.
And graciously and mercifully, we planted again with a group of people that didn't want to quit as River Church. But I was thinking about this the other day. We had somebody locally here do our logo for the branch, and they went
Right.
to a church right here, not far from my home.
Yeah.
And she was a graphic designer. She worked at this postnet type place, like a UPS store kind of thing. And so we got to know her and whatnot. And so she designed our logo and whatnot. And then we made these signs for the Branch Family Church. And we'd put them out on Friday afternoons because the sign ordinance in
Right.
Charlotte demands that you do this. And so we were trying to guide people to where we were meeting, the rec center we were meeting at. A couple weeks go by, and I was in the Postnet store, and I was talking to this girl. And she's like, "Hey, my pastor talked about you this weekend in church." And I said, "I don't even know your pastor. I've never met him."
Right.
She goes, "Yeah, yeah. He said all these green signs that you see pointing to the Brunch Family Church. How self-serving is it that people would go to church just because they get free brunch?" And the girl was like, I didn't know, Derek, I didn't know what to do. Do I stand up and tell him like, no, 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 it's branch. It's branch.
Right.
Jesus was the branch in Old Testament prophecy. This is why they're doing it, but it never left me. And one of the transitions I've been thinking about is what if we just abandon the Sunday morning gathering
And did brunch.
or did brunch at homes? Like, hey, 10 people, go
Yeah.
gather over here for
Yeah.
brunch.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking. I'm
No, I know you're
seriously
not.
thinking about the
Yeah.
possibility of having brunch church. Like
Bro.
even just as an as a I'll give credit to that guy who was not excited about it. Hey, thanks for the Holy Spirit prophetically speaking through you.
I love
And
it.
now we've developed brunch church as a means for getting our neighbors and our friends connected to us, because who doesn't love brunch?
Right. Right.
And now we can come together, we can eat, you know, quiche
Bro.
and drink mimosas, and we can talk about life
I love it. I
and
love it.
see what happens.
I
See what
love it.
happens.
I love it.
So, look, I'm not. Look, I live in the South. I'm not abandoning the Sunday 10 a.m. So, River Church, recognize that we are going to still continue on loving Jesus together. But I just feel like there's an opportunity, and there's some shifts that need to happen
Yeah.
in the way we do things. The message has never changed. The method can change all day long.
So I love that, and I also love that that's the segue into what tacos really is what you're doing here. Because I agree with you though, man. The idea of gathering around food. I mean, how often do you even see that in what Jesus was doing? Just the gathering, the community doing life together. I agree. We are, I think, in a huge shift. We've talked about this before. I think we're on the cusp of a true reformation,
Mm-hmm.
where we are awakening and rediscovering what has always been, that Jesus is the cornerstone upon which
Yep.
our faith is built, and I think the church. You said earlier in this conversation that the nationalistic, hierarchical, dualistic approach to God, those churches have actually grown maybe in these last days. But I think there's another thing taking place that can be messy at times and has all kinds of names. We've talked about it. Some reference it as deconstruction and reconstruction, but there's an awakening taking place.
Mm-hmm.
A yes taking place in which some of these things you're talking about, where we'll figure out different models. I even think what you're doing there could be opportunity for that to fit within
Yeah.
what you're doing. I know you
Oh,
guys are
yeah.
looking at buildings and shifting how to do even Sunday morning, not necessarily what Sunday morning
Yeah.
looks
Yeah.
like, but how to do
Yep.
buildings and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I really honestly believe I would use the word restoration.
Yeah. I like
Because
that.
I even
I
look
like
back
that.
at the actual Reformation with Luther, and I've been doing a little research into Luther. He really didn't reform anything. It
Nah.
was just a big church split,
Yeah. I've heard you say
and
that.
from that point forward, we became divided. And look, more power to the message but it was a restoration of a message that the early church already knew. They knew the just should live by faith.
Right.
That got lost.
Right.
So we're in a process of restoring,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of times Brad Jerzak talks about this, and it really resonates with me. He said a lot of his friends wonder, like, man, have you gone like way left? You're a super liberal and you're out on this branch. And he's like, no, no, no. I'm drilling down into the root. I want
Right.
to go back. And he
Right.
said, that is honestly the most conservative thing that you can do. I want to
Yeah.
go back and find out and conserve what the early church had and bring it into the context of my own culture,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
didn't have the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
no, thank God we have the Bible. And you know my statement. I love the Word of God and I love my Bible too. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. I'm not an anti-Bible guy, but if you're worshiping the text more than
Yeah.
you are the rhema, the Word of God that is Jesus
Yeah.
manifested in the flesh, man, you're going to miss some stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where we go back to the whole Emmaus reading of Scripture. I need to have the Rabbi Jesus, the Holy Spirit, walking me through Scripture so it can point to how am I becoming more like Jesus by engaging with this story or this,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
text.
It's good,
And
man.
it's valuable for instruction and
Yeah.
rebuke and
Yeah.
teaching, all those things. And I want more people to engage with their Bibles, but not necessarily for a view of God that's outside of Jesus. That's why I always tell people, that are really, really new to this, hey, like just read the Gospel of John.
Right.
Don't like literally
Yeah.
don't read anything else.
Yeah.
Please
Yeah.
don't read anything
Yeah.
else. Don't read
Yeah.
Leviticus.
No, right, right. Not at least not until you have established John, the gospel, the good news in your heart, until you,
Right,
as you
right.
said, until your faith is about connecting with
Yeah.
what is Jesus, what is I love that.
And be around people that you can ask questions
Yeah.
and that will not shame you or judge you, but will say, hey, listen, have you thought about it this way?
Yeah. Yeah.
As you're reading the text of the Bible, have you thought about this? And kind of
Yeah.
introduce that Jesus side to it. See, that's where I think in becoming like Jesus, not only do we need him to walk on the road to Emmaus with us to open our eyes to the scriptures, but ultimately we're going to be walking on the road with other people
Yeah. That's right.
and helping open their eyes
That's right.
to how we see Jesus in all of it. So,
Amen.
yeah, bro.
I love it, man.
Love it.
I love it, man. Well,
Have you had any good tacos lately? Anything different?
I actually I've been down to Optimus Hall, so I was just down there. I just met Brett Endress down there. Brett, you'd like Brett. He's friends with Rod Williams and John Crowder and a bunch of others. And
Okay.
so we had good tacos down there. That was awesome.
Nice. Well, I got a little taco story for you. My daughter brought home a taco from this place, and it was a buffalo chicken ranch taco.
Nice.
And well, kind of. here was my thought. It's like, okay, taco, you're appropriating another food, and just because people love the taste of buffalo chicken so much. I mean, we make ranch dips, buffalo chicken dip now.
Yeah.
It's almost like buffalo chicken became a licensing thing, and we'll license it into every realm. And it was good. Trust me, it was good. It was there was nothing wrong with it.
We want a
It
taco.
was great. But I thought, you know what? Just give me an El Pastor with a little cilantro and onions on a really small corn tortilla. It's like my spiritual life. I just want to get back to simple.
There you go. I love it, man. Yeah. I had all kinds of the tacos I had were fancy. They were all unique. I'm trying to remember the taco place down there.
Was it Velvet Taco?
Yes, Velvet Taco.
Yeah.
So the Thai
Velvet makes some good ones.
Thai chicken taco. I'm like, it's amazing, but yeah, it's not old school. It's
I don't turn them anything down. Jason,
no.
You know how I am. See, this is the deal. We are open to all tacos. All tacos are welcome.
That's exactly it. Well, it's just because
God.
Because God is good, we can participate in all tacos. That's exactly right. That's
well, hey, bro,
hilarious,
it's been so good doing this. Like I said, just to let our audience know what an honor and a privilege it is to have been doing this with you. I really look forward to your book. Thanks for sending me the first 5 chapters. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's gonna bless a lot of people.
Thanks, man.
And although I'm taking a bit of a break and centering back in on where River Church is going, this isn't the last time we're going to talk.
No,
so,
love you. Well, I love you too, man. This has been really, really sweet, and whether we record it or not, we'll have many more of these. But it's been really sweet doing this, man, and I'm excited about what's next.
Yep. Yeah. Same.
Hey guys, so glad you joined us on Rethinking God with Tacos. You can find me, Jason Clark, online at afamilystory.org, where I encourage you to sign up on our mailing list. We send out an email twice a month letting you know about new podcasts, articles, and new books or products that we have coming out. Plus, occasionally I'll keep you up on my schedule where I'm traveling. My Twitter handle is @JasonClarkIs. I'm on Instagram under the same handle, and you can find me on Facebook as well. Hey, all of these podcasts are available on all the platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google. If you could, like and share across all your media platforms and write a review on iTunes. It really does help expand the message and build the audience. Hey, love doing this journey with you. Praying grace and wonder over you today.